Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we are bringing another interesting news story for you. So let's begin. My name is Lucas, and this is my story about how I learned the hard way that sometimes the one you love the most takes you for granted, until suddenly it is too late. Sophie and I got acquainted when we were in our early 20s. We'd always been joined at the hip, one of those couples that people looked at and said, yeah, they're meant for each other. Our relationship was easy. Late-night drives and deep conversations between two people entirely captivated with each other. Getting married. It felt right. We had big plans, too, to travel, build a life together, start a family someday. And for a little while, it was all good. But life happens. That I was building my business from nothing, putting in long hours, that I was sacrificing. But even as I got busier, Sophie was always the most important thing in my life. And I made time for her, little surprises, spontaneous date nights, or just sitting down to discuss our day after work. I made it a point to let her know her importance. At first, she appreciated it. She was proud of me, encouraging, and my greatest advocate. But then, she began to change. It started with little things, complaining that she wanted more me time, saying that she needed to focus on herself. I supported that, to be honest. Everyone needs space to grow. But then it turned into something else. Then she began talking about putting herself first. At first I thought she meant self-care, like working out, reading, doing things that brought her joy. But that wasn't it. What it really meant was whatever she wanted, no matter what it did to our marriage. She stopped trying. She didn't care about what we had planned. She hardly even inquired about my day. But at the same time, she could still expect me to treat her like she was the most important person in the world. It was like she wanted all the benefits of marriage without actually being a wife. At first, I convinced myself we were just going through a rough patch. Every marriage hits peaks and valleys, doesn't it? So I did what any loving husband would do. I tried harder. I did my best to stay out of conflict. If I was upset about something, I tried to communicate it. But if I felt bad, I swallowed my feelings if it became argument, not solution. Rather than argue, I showered her with gifts, flowers, perfume, even the pricey handbag she had been lusting after for months. Anything to let her know I still cared, that I was still here. But none of it had an impact. She would thank me sometimes, but behind it was no real emotion, no authentic excitement, no gratitude. Just a token smile before she went on to whatever else she was going to do, most often her phone. Then one day she said that she needed space, that she needed to find herself. Initially, I didn't think twice about it. I was like, okay, maybe she's just trying to find herself. So I let her have the room that she requested. I could no longer be the one to pull her close. I allowed her to go out more, to have her nights out, to do whatever she thought she had to do. But months went by, and things only deteriorated. She became more self-centered. Like she was the main character in a story, blasting music, and I was background noise. Someone she could use, not love. She began to act as if she were too good for me, as if being with me was a compromise. And I'll be honest, that hurt. As she convinced herself she could do better than me, I watched the woman I fell in love with become more and more out of reach. When you care about someone who does not appreciate you, it gets in your head. You begin to doubt yourself. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm the problem. I spent so many nights looking at the ceiling, trying to understand what had changed. What did I do wrong? When did I become not enough for her? But the truth was I already knew deep down. As much as I loved her, I could not rescue someone who didn't want to be rescued. I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending everything was okay. Then came the night that upended everything. I'd waited up for hours, watching the clock, listening to the sound of cars whizzing by outside. Sophie had come home late before, but something about that night felt different. As I heard the door finally open, I exhaled, fighting tears. I didn't feel like arguing. I was tired of fighting. When she entered, she stumbled a little. Before I even turned to look at her, the smell of alcohol hit me. She said hardly anything to me, threw her bag on the couch, and kicked off her shoes. I inhaled my annoyance and said, Sophie, do you understand what you're doing? It's not just about coming home late, you're pushing me away. I have waited, but you are no longer behaving like a married woman." She made that eye roll, as if I had just said the most ridiculous thing ever. Then she laughed, lazily smirking. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You think I need you? Do you really think you're so special? Plenty of men want me. If you leave, I replace you the next day." My chest would feel tight, but I wouldn't let anyone see. She wasn't done. She sat upright and said, "I'm finished with giving you all my rules. I'm done playing by anybody else's rules. It's my life, and you or the rest of society are not going to tell me how to live it. I'm in my baby girl era now, Lucas. Just deal with it, or don't." That was it. That was when I knew I had lost her. Or maybe she had lost me. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't plead with her to see the light. What was the point? She had already made up her mind about who she wanted to be, and it wasn't the woman I had married. Well, I did what was only left to be done. I allowed her to live the life she wanted. And I walked away. The following morning, I Googled the best divorce lawyer in town and dialed. I didn't want to prolong the issue or make her life harder. I just wanted a clean break. The legal process moved fast. Because we didn't have kids, I wasn't going to duke it out over furniture or joint checking accounts. There was relatively little back and forth about things being settled. The fairness or unfairness of it all didn't matter. I wanted out. I didn't even go to the last meeting. I just left everything to my lawyer. And once the papers were signed, I did precisely what I had vowed to do. I disappeared. No calls. No texts. No long, emotional messages. I was just gone. She didn't seem to care at first. If anything, her expression was one of relief. She made herself believe that this was her clean slate, her opportunity to finally escape. I caught glimpses on social media, photos of her out with friends, drinks in hand, living it up as if she'd just won a victory. Her posts were full of captions about new beginnings and knowing your worth. For a time, it appeared that she had moved on with no hesitation. She was out dating almost immediately, and naturally, there were a lot of men around who were happy to amuse her. But now, something was different. She wasn't the catch. She thought maybe she got the attention, but not the kind she had imagined. The men who pursued her weren't seeking commitment, just fun. And the ones who were looking for something serious? They weren't the sort of men that she wanted, and I didn't see in myself, but I heard things. She hopped from guy to guy so quickly that nothing ever lasted. One by one, they all left. The attention she had once reveled in began to feel empty and pointless. Gradually, the bravado she had put on began to splinter. She was on her own for the first time. Not by choice. Not for self-discovery. But because she had shunned the only person who truly loved her. How did I know? Well, we had some common friends who still talked to her. As for me, I wasn't looking back. I had a choice after the divorce. I could have dove into another relationship, searching for someone to fill the gap. I could have lost myself in meaningless flings, distractions, and short-lived pleasures. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. And that was not what I wanted. I had invested too long erasing my own self in a marriage in which I was invisible. It was time to pick me now. So I did. Where I dove into my business, using that as my vehicle to recreate. I was busy building on what I built up from zero, making it tougher, scaling it even higher. Work wasn't just work anymore. It was a reminder of my capabilities, of my purpose beyond being someone's husband. Gradually, I began to see results. My business grew in ways I couldn't have imagined. And for the first time in forever, I felt I was in control of my life again. I also concentrated on my health, both mental and physical. I took up boxing because I needed to feel powerful again. I began to eat better and sleep better, to take care of myself in a way that I hadn't in years. I learned that some people are incapable of ever being grateful for anything, no matter how much you give. I was unwilling to be satisfied with anything that didn't truly enrich my life. I was not going to allow loneliness to deceive me into retracing what was comfortable. I was no longer going to pursue relationships that weren't right for me. I learned to live by myself without being lonely. I settled into my own company, something I hadn't experienced in a long while. And slowly I flourished. That, more than anything else, was my big victory. It was years before I saw Sophie again. That's when it happened. That day I was running errands, picking up a few things from a department store. I rounded a corner, and there she was.
Sophie.
A few feet from me, holding a shopping bag, looking at me like I was a ghost. For a moment, I hardly recognized her. She still looked good. She always took pride in her appearance, but something was off.
Her eyes scanned me.
Lucas, she said at last, as if uncertain, even reluctant. I nodded and smiled politely. Hey, Sophie. Been a while. She laughed nervously, looping a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Wow, you look different. I shrugged.
Yeah.
Life's been good. She began asking questions, seeking to extend the conversation. How have you been? What have you been up to? I answered casually, never too much to her. Keep it light. I wasn't mean, but I also wasn't giving her what she wanted. I couldn't tell what she was thinking. After a couple more minutes of small talk, she smiled, uncertain. Perhaps we can meet up sometime? I smiled back. Yeah, maybe. But I knew we wouldn't. The chapter in my life was closed. A few days after that meeting, she contacted me. It began with an innocuous message, one of those casual, "Hey, it was nice seeing you the other day," texts. I paused before answering. My fingers hovered over the keys. I replied, going against my better judgment. From there, the conversation gradually took off. Nothing serious, nothing profound, just chit-chat. Have you been? Nostalgia seeping into it, filling the space where anger and resentment once dwelled. In the weeks that followed, we texted off and on. And then she would send a message out of nowhere about something that reminded her of me. And yet, despite it all, I couldn't deny it, the feelings was still there. You don't just stop loving someone the next day. But what I slowly learned was that love alone would not be enough. The trust? That was long gone. One night she wanted to meet up. Just dinner.
Just to talk. A bit of me wanted to say yes.
I won't lie, I was tempted. But then I paused and asked myself what I'd been avoiding this whole time. What was the point? What was I actually searching for? An apology? Some kind of explanation? A brief opportunity to mend what was too far gone?
No.
Deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't need her to provide me closure. But it was something I had to give myself. So I declined. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. Just a simple, I don't think that's a very good idea. It took me a long time to admit that I was broken. I didn't want to admit it. But Sophie had inflicted more harm on me than I understood. Not just because she left, but because of what she made me feel before she did. Unworthy. Replaceable. Like I was never enough. I told myself I was fine at first. I threw myself into work, exercised more, spent more time with buddies. But no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, there was a weight in my chest that wasn't going away. I knew that if I didn't address it, it would shadow in every aspect of my life. So I did what I never thought I would do. I went to therapy. I won't lie, it was weird at first. Sitting there talking to a stranger about all the things I had buried for years. But over the next several weeks, I began to see things more clearly. I hadn't been stupid to love Sophie. I was not weak for wanting to save my marriage. I was simply a man who dedicated his heart to the wrong woman. And that wasn't my failure. It was merely a lesson I had to learn. Healing wasn't instant. It didn't happen that one day you woke up and felt free. It was the little things. So I burned every bridge with Sophie. No more texts. No more small talk. No more what-ifs. And I concluded that my story with her was finished. Before I deleted her number, I texted once more. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just the truth. I wish you the best. But in retrospect, I thought my belief that the only way to heal from someone who betrays you is to get even, to show that person they lost something valuable, was skewed. But I learned something on the way. Revenge is a waste of energy. Revenge, after all, isn't always the best medicine. It's simply moving on, developing into the finest you possible, and allowing them to watch from a distance. And that, my friends, is precisely what I did. That's it for today's story. We'd like to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever experienced such a situation? How did you handle it? If you like this, Please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories from real life. Until next time, take care.